Welcome to Transmissions Alt Mode, where we talk about all the comics and media about the Happy Holidays and welcome to Transmissions Alt Mode. If you listen to the main Transmission show on Wednesday, you kind of know what you're in for. This is another clip show celebrating these 6 years of our podcasting. And in this one, we're going to have another Declassified, and we have some interviews from some of the best comics creators of the last decade, and we really just hope you enjoy. Thanks for everyone that suggested some of these interviews and clips, and just thanks for listening for the last 6 years. We hope you enjoy the show, and we will be back next week with new episodes.
Hey everyone, this is Yoshi, and thanks for listening to this episode. What you're about to hear is a clip from Alt Mode episode 137, our interview with Nick Roche, and we're just talking to him about how he got into comics in general, and how he got to meet Simon Furman and basically get a step into his career. It's a really great listen, and I hope you enjoy it.
But, yeah. So let's do a little deeper dive into Transformers. So how did you first get into Transformers? So were you a kid back in the 80s picking up the comic in Dublin and getting starting off with issue 1 there?
Well, there's a few corrections there. I live in Dublin, but I'm not from Dublin.
Okay.
I'm from a place called Wexford, which is in the southeast of Ireland. If you imagine Ireland as a seated teddy bear facing off to the left, I come from the arse of said teddy bear. And I'm proud of it, and I smell like it too, guys. And
there's actually a Wexford near Pittsburgh too.
Of course there is. Really?
Yes.
That's mental. There you go. Pittsburgh is in Pennsylvania, isn't it?
Yes. And western part of Pennsylvania.
Yes, and my cousin is living in Pennsylvania. He's from Wexford. I wonder, has he just gotten lost there? I don't know. Hi, Damien, if you're listening. He won't be. My first awareness of Transformers was the TV ads. It's just this guy shouting, saying, "Transformers, turn from robot to car and back again." And I'm like, what the fuck? And so I genuinely didn't believe that these toys would transform. So I assumed that when I saw them in toy shops, you'd get like a blister pack or a box, and there'd be a figure of Optimus Prime or Jazz or something like that, and there would be a car that comes with it that you would have to pretend the robot turned in, like Action Masters. So that's why. So I never thought that Transformers were even possible. So that was my first kind of introduction to it, was the TV ads, and then it was the TV show. I happened to be watching kids TV on the morning that More Than Meets the Eye aired over in the UK, which I'm not sure. I mean, I think it was 1984 over here, but I'm not sure. It could have been early 1985, but it's so nuts that I because I was never up early in the mornings, So what the hell was I doing the morning that, like Bumblebee and Wheeljack were buying fluorescent lights, So yeah. And
when did you discover the comics after watching the show?
Not until like 2 years later. I was the first time I picked up the comics was like Target 2006, which was like 1986 was when that was going on. And I knew guys in my class had Transformers comics, and then the first one I read was the very first issue of Target 2006, which is there's a prelude issue, which isn't the one I read, but I read part 1 of Target 2006, which is issue 79, and it had Ultra Magnus and Galvatron on the front cover, and the first page is Cyclonus and Scourge, splash page of them just tearing through the air. And it's the next page then has got them. Galvatron is in pistol mode on Cyclonus's kind of cockpit, and they're on their way to depose Megatron and Soundwave. And they arrive at the Decepticon base. They bury Megatron and Soundwave under all this rubble, and suddenly they're in charge. Ultra Magnus is there on Earth looking for Optimus Prime, who's just disappeared. And it's the very end of the issue. No, that's what it is. At the very end of the issue, you Emirate Zaron on Cybertron. You get to go to Cybertron. You get to see what's happening there, and you meet a character called Impactor. And Impactor is talking about this new warrior called Ultra Magnus, and that was my first comic that I read. And it had Ultra Magnus, Galvatron, and Impactor, and it's like, so they're my guys. Do you know what I mean? But they're more than Prime and Megatron ever will be. Like the Transformers the movie guys and the UK comics guys, so that was it. And years later, when I went to my first Transformers convention in 1999 in the UK, went as a fan, obviously, and they had an art competition. And the reason I went is because Simon Furman was going to be at it, and he'd only really started to do, kind of public appearances. I think nostalgia was only really starting to kick in, and there was a realization that people would actually want to listen to you talk about the comic that you worked on, 10, 15 years ago, sort of thing. So he was judging an art competition, and I entered the art competition, and I drew. I was the battlefield with Ratchet, kind of holding the hand of Wild Rider who'd been shot down in battle, and it was basically sort of showing the compassionate side of Ratchet. I really must dig it out sometime. But anyway, Simon was the judge of the competition, and he picked mine out as the overall winner, and I got to win an original piece of artwork from the very first issue of Transformers that I owned. So I own a page from issue 79 of Transformers that was given to me as a prize by Simon Furman on the first time I met him. So yeah, so it felt like it was all going the right direction, from the start, to be honest. I know it sounds like sort of like, why don't you just make up your own origin story, Nick? But, like all I ever wanted to do was draw Transformers, and all I ever wanted to do was work with Simon Furman. And so even at that age, at 19, to kind of get that weird sort of like universe aligning sort of thing of, pat on the head from him, and he handed, I got to win that page. And the page I got was the second page, which has got Cyclonus, Scourge, and Galvatron sort of, traveling toward to meet Megatron, so it's so that was it. So yeah, I was hooked from there on in, basically, so it's and as I say, it's Target 2006 is the UK story that ties in with Transformers the movie. So it was all about it was all about Hot Rod and Cop and Blur and Cyclonus and Scourge, and Springer was in it, and it ends with the Wreckers are a big part of Target 2006. Mm-hmm. So it's all been leading to this series. I think feels like it, So yeah, better not screw it up. Too late.
Did you ever remind Simon about meeting him when you were 19? Or?
Yeah, I have done. Yeah, and I dug out. I might see if I can find it to send to you guys to accompany with the podcast maybe. But yeah, I found a picture last year of he and I. Kind of like he shaking my head. I'd queued to meet him or whatever, so I've just got like ridiculously lank straight hair to my shoulders, and I'm wearing my episode 1 long sleeve black sweatshirt because it was 1999, so I'm wearing my Phantom Menace apparel, and so I reminded him, and like he's and it gets to the stage now like where I kind of talk to him about kind of being a fan age sort of 6 and 7, and he's just like, stop reminding me what age you are, so he's just it's so. I mean, I remember watching Saturday morning TV when I was a kid, and in 1987, and Simon Furman was on it. Simon Furman was a guest, is because the Marvel UK comic Transformers comic was getting huge numbers at the time, and so they had them on to sort of like talk about the next sort of stage of the Galvatron saga. So he was on with some artwork featuring Rodimus Prime, and it's from issue 114, I think. So it's the issue after Death's had been introduced. So it's just, and I remind him of that, and so he's still weirded out by the fact that I was sitting at home in my pajamas, sort of scratching myself while he was coming on pimping like this, and the interview would have ended. He goes, "Oh, thanks to Simon, the new comic is out, and now let's go to the studio with Swing Out Sister," singing Breakout or something, So yeah.
Does that video exist anywhere online?
I've looked for it online. I've looked for it so hard online, and I don't think it has appeared yet. But he has a video, a VHS of it, and he knows where it is, and he knows where the body's buried. But the other thing about it I remember as well is that they had like toys out for, they had like, all the toys that were available to that point. It seemed to be like on the kind of the studio desk, where the guests were kind of idly playing with it while they were chatting on a panel, and. I'm pretty sure, in my mind's eye, Triptychon was there. Triptychon was never available over here, you see? And I remember just going, how can I, and, desperately trying to figure, if I write to them, will they give that to me? This weird sense of entitlement thinking, but, I like Transformers more than anyone, and I can't get that toy. So surely they'll, admire my chutzpah and send it to me. But I never did, and so they never did. But it's, so it's the toys and seeing the uncolored artwork is kind of what sticks out for me there. So yeah, I've been shadowing that man for nearly 30 years now. I'll eventually steal his soul and sort of kind of use his spine as a toast rack.
Become the new Simon?
Oh, if only. I just want to be the old Simon. Jesus. I'm trying to write. Well, I finished writing The Sins of the Wreckers, but the thing is about the way I write and the way James writes as well, we like lots and lots of words. And you read a Simon Furman script and he can do it in like a fifth of the dialogue, you know, and you still feel like you've had a nourishing meal. It's kind of nuts. Like he just, and he writes for artists as well. He writes so sparsely, and even his dialogue descriptions or his panel descriptions are so like, you know, prime punches Galvatron sort of thing. And so it's completely up to interpretation, whereas James is very detailed in how he wants it composed, and I'm kind of anal like that. Even with myself, I kind of write ridiculously detailed stuff.
Yeah, and both Charles and I have bought some of James' scripts, and yeah, they're pretty thick.
They really are. And it's I don't know if you've bought issue 6 of More Than Meets the Eye. Have you? Did you pick?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Imagine knowing that you've got to draw 22 pages, but the script is 60 effing pages. Oh, James. But it was worth it. That's the thing. It's worth it with James because, you know, like even still, like issue 6 is kind of like, you know, feels like 50 years ago, and still it kind of comes quite high in people's favorite More Than Meets the Eye issues and stuff. So I'm kind of glad that he asked me back for that one, you know. But the funny thing is, I was rereading Last Stand of the Wreckers. I felt it was the least I could do before I wrote the sequel, and it's really kind of compared to the way James and I write. It's really sparsely written because we were writing together and we really pared each other down and we edited each other to hell. You know, we were like sort of like, no, we don't need it. We were really sort of ruthless with it, you know, and basically telling each other, we don't need it. We can do without that, you know, and, you know, we just managed to get it down to the bare bones, or as bare bones as he and I could possibly ever get it, you know. So when we don't write together, our characters talk a lot more, you know. It's just interesting to notice that, you know, it's not just it's a James trait or it's a my trait. It's both of us. We both have the sickness.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about, or tell us? I should say me, because lots of people should be listening.
I'll tell you, Charles. I'll tell you. You won't tell anyone else. These freeloaders.
About the group, the fan group Transmasters UK, and how you came to meet James Roberts.
Transmasters had nothing to do with Transformers. It was just a little fetish club that James and no, it's it was So it was when the UK Generation 2 comic ended. They in '94, I guess, they had a little kind of a blurb in the back of it, basically saying, "Come one, come all. We're going to continue Generation 2 in a fanzine form, and here's a post office number, or I was in post office. The guy's house. A guy called Matt Dallas was running it, and he was kind of you know, you could write off to it, and you could read what fans were going to continue the story. James had been a member of this fan club before then. I think he had sort of maybe picked up fandom after the US Generation 2 comic read. I think he might have kind of made some fanzine connections there. So, but I kind of sent off for all these comics, and you know, it was mail order. It was all pen pal based sort of shenanigans, and so his stuff, there was lots of genuinely good writing going on, but his stuff, kind of, as you can imagine, sort of stood out, you know. And again, because he wrote them as kind of characters, you know, the thing about it, the great thing about it back then is there was lots of interpretation of Transformers. And there was one writer called Martin McVeigh who was very good at kind of exploring the alienness and the other of Transformers, and the fact that they were robots. And you know, when he drew them, because he drew as well, this Martin guy, he didn't always, he'd used like the toy kind of designs, so to make them even more alien. So especially with Ratchet and Ironhide, they look really kind of, you know, like alien robots, you know. So there's lots. That was one of the upsides of it. So yes, James's stuff, James, just ridiculous. Just loved his stuff straight away, and he's been kind enough to sort of say that when he saw artwork from myself and kind of Jack Lawrence was another fan artist who's gone on to be a pro artist as well in the US kind of industry. He sort of saw us and he was sort of like, oh right, well, you know, shit just got real, you know, like kind of that he kind of felt that the art had kind of like leveled up a little bit, or that it was artists who were kind of had an eye on doing it professionally who had kind of gotten involved, which is obviously kind of him to say. But we never worked together was the thing. We were about to, because it was all a shared universe, you know, it was all continuing on the Marvel Generation 2 universe, and we were due to work together. And then the weird thing is with fandoms is they're always at their kind of most potent when the official merchandise, the official kind of output is is quiet. And so it was really, this fanzine scene was really strong in the mid to late 90s. But then when Dreamwave came along, you could get sort of professionally rendered, written and drawn Transformers comics, more than once a month, really, so kind of the fan output kind of tended to dwindle. So he and I never really got to work together. But it's so interesting that you never, the golden rule is you never throw away an idea. And I see stuff, I see stuff in More Than Meets the Eye that are the kernels of which were in early stories that never got printed in the fanzines. Do you know what I mean? Like really, like even The Lost Light, the idea of a kind of ship kind of crewed by a team of Autobots on a mission, that takes a lot of its basis in an idea that James had going back sort of 15, 20 years now, and he's finally getting to realize it, and I don't think anyone will think that I'm sort of like downplaying James's achievement there. I'm definitely not. It's just so interesting to sort of see that kind of come to fruition. So the first time I met James was in 2001 at a Transformers convention in the UK. He was publishing Eugenesis and this fan novel that he'd been working on for years and years and years. And James is a guy with and has always had a full-time job, not like me. I was professionally unemployed for a while I was doing the artist thing, and he's a little bit kind of older than me, and kind of he had like, had a missus and had a child, and I didn't have any of these things, and he still managed to crap out a novel, and so I met this dashing sort of kind of English guy that you'd find from Central Casting, sort of like, I'm bumbling into this kind of church hall or whatever it was with a suitcase full of this beautifully designed, beautifully produced novel that he'd kind of knocked together, this 500-page opus. And so that was kind of we knew who each other were from like speaking kind of like online and stuff. At that stage we were all online, but so I just made sure I was quite high up in the queue because those books were flying fast. And so we just sort of stayed friends since. And the Eugenesis was my beach reading that year when I was on holiday, and it was just didn't think that was possible with Transformers, what he did with that, and it's old hat because he does it every week, but it's it was really sort of like, it's like, Jesus, you could do this, you have permission to do this with Transformers, so it was and the thing is, you didn't officially. That was why it was so good, because he didn't have Hasbro kind of like breathing down his neck, but now he does, and he's still sort of managing to show them kind of how it's done, I think. But that's how he and I met. And so I knew that kind of, if I've been trying to get him work as best I could. He was always going to end up where he ended up, it was kind of, but I had doors open for me, so I was, keen to sort of open them for him as whenever I could, so I'm sort of, it's baffled me that I wrote a Transformers comic professionally before he did, but again, it's just doors being open. It depends on the order they open, so he's here now and he ain't going away.
This next clip is from March of 2016, and it's Transmissions episode 159, and we were interviewing both John Barber and James Roberts together and talking to them about writing IDW Transformers. At this point, both of them were nearing issue 50 of their respective title. Robots in Disguise had changed names to Transformers by this time, but More Than Meets the Eye was still More Than Meets the Eye. It hadn't gone to Lost Light yet. So this was a fun interview, and I hope you enjoy.
I know a lot of fans and readers have described when trying to talk about the two Transformers titles broadly as one being plot driven, which is Transformers, and the other being character driven, More Than Meets the Eye. Would you agree with that statement generally?
Yeah, it's I don't know. I have heard that said, and it's tricky because More Than Meets the Eye is, yes, it's about the characters, but the plots. It's quite plotty as well. It does, it gets there's various twists and turns, and it's not something you can necessarily dip into, at a random issue, and know exactly what's going on. And similarly, I think with John's book as well, it's there's always wheels within wheels, plots within plots. But it's the characters you remember, and it's the characters that you pick up the book to read about, I think. So
Yeah, I think it's harder to separate those two things out sometimes. I mean, it's funny because when you think of More Than Meets the Eye, probably especially, you do think of the dialogue and and Alex's acting and the characters and all those things, but they're really plot dense comic books. I mean, if you actually sit down and start saying what happens in one of the issues, there are a lot of events that occur. I think in Transformers, I feel like we kind of hit, I don't know, sort of like more comic booky events or actions that happen in it. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, I don't know, big expansive. Well, now Optimus Prime is going to declare himself ruler of Earth, kind of moments. So I think that adds to the feeling of the plot driven. Although, I mean, there is a lot of plot mechanics going on in Transformers. Yeah. That's for other people to decide. I don't know.
But you can tell the strength of a concept when every time you hear it, it does sound exciting. And Optimus Prime declaring himself ruler of Earth does always sound awesome. So yeah.
Well, I mean, just to follow up on that. We've also heard, at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the writing styles for John, you use the Marvel method, quote unquote, where you do a lot of back and forth with Andrew or with the artist, where you develop the plot, then the artist draws it, then you script over the artwork, and James does a lot of detailed scripts at the beginning, and then hands it off to Alex or whoever is working on the issue. Is that correct? Do I have that right, or am I
more or less? I mean, with Andrew, like what I do, Levy and I have been doing that too. I think maybe Levy and I might have done that earlier. I think we might have started with Punishment because I wanted to kind of give more room for what we could do with the Made Fire stuff. I don't know if that really mattered, but I think that might have been where it started. And then, but usually if there's a guest artist or something, I'll do usually 100% of the time, if there's an artist that isn't one of those two, I'd be comfortable doing the same thing with Brendan, Brendan Cahill. I mean, but that's because we've known each other for 100 years. But trust the other artists is that we don't, like Andrew and I think can at this point finish, in a comic book sense, finish each other's sentences. Like I don't need to say the whole thing because Andrew's going to take it and go that, which is great, which is always great.
Well, in my case, it's as you describe. I mean, since day one, it's been the sort of full script method, and that's not to suggest that Alex and I don't have a sort of an increasingly intuitive sort of relationship in terms of making the issues. It's no reflection on Alex's ability to decide, how things should be done. It probably takes us back slightly in a way which might undermine what I said before, but it takes us back slightly to the sort of plot and character-driven elements of the story. Actually, you know what? It reinforces what I said because More Than Meets the Eye is actually very plotty. I mean, you only need to look at, if you pick a TF Wiki, page, a synopsis of an issue of More Than Meets the Eye, and it's usually quite dense. And so much of my time in putting the stories together is sort of parsing out the information, making sure the right things are said, by the right people at the right times. And I can't afford for there to be that sort of element of the unknown in terms of what I end up getting to work with in terms of the placement of word balloons and the amount of space I've got for people to speak. So I think because it's very dialogue driven and perhaps contrary to some people's perception of it, it is quite plot heavy as well. I need to have full script to best control how the story unfolds. I don't have any sort of innate aversion to the so-called Marvel method. I mean, John and I did it with the Dark Cybertron crossover, and there was part of a recent issue of More Than Meets the Eye, part of Dying of the Light, where we could afford to move to the sort of Marvel method because the story lent itself to that. But for the reasons I said, it's still for the foreseeable future a case of of close scripting.
I forgot about Dark Cybertron. We did do that there, didn't we? I totally forgot about that. Yeah. Like what I was saying was like, with James Livio, with Andrew and Livio, we know what we're going to do enough that it makes sense. But when I was going through scripting stuff, I mean, I'll usually write in the panel descriptions what's being said. It just maybe won't exactly be dialogue. It'll be, John explains how he writes scripts would be a panel description, and then I'd have to figure out how to explain that, in the dialogue. So I basically know what's going on, in those. But some of the, Sarah Petrie Roche, who drew most of Conquerors. I mean, she was still, these were, I think, her second, third, and fourth comics she'd ever drawn. So I feel like throwing in plot first on top of here's a billion characters you have to draw, because those are really not easy issues to jump into. I felt like that would be unfair, and that would be me not doing my job. Where I'm happy to not do my job when it's with Andrew.
Andrew invites you not to do your job. Joking, Andrew.
Sarah did a great job on those issues, by the way.
Oh yeah, those are amazing. I mean, the stuff she's doing on Till All Are One is fantastic too. But those are not easy issues to draw. Like most of my scripts have a bunch of apologies now. Sorry for the laundry list of characters going through a space bridge at one moment.
So, getting into with the original, when both series started out, you kind of took Optimus Prime and Megatron both off stage for pretty much most of the first season. I guess we're referring to them, and I think that was positive because it allowed both series to develop the secondary characters a lot more, as you've already talked about. Now, however, those characters have been pretty central to the stories in the last year or so. And how do you see these characters and their relationship to the franchise and the Transformers universe? Do you find that they naturally pull the story towards them? And what have you tried to do to put a new spin on these characters?
Want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would have you go first every time. I don't know. You're welcome to. I don't know. Like, to me, part of the excitement of getting to work on Transformers, I mean, part of it is it's cool to elevate up smaller characters, and I love seeing that happen. You know what I mean? Like, I love comics where that happens. But for me as a writer, part of the fun is getting to play with some of the icons. And sometimes we'll get into the parts where, like, because Prowl was like the first Transformer I ever had when I was a kid, I literally didn't realize he wasn't a main character in Transformers until I was like well into my 30s. Optimus Prime is probably he's got to be one of the 10 or 15 most recognizable characters in the world. People know who that is everywhere now. And to me, it's like getting to play with like Batman or something. I mean, man, that's cool. Like, that's a character that means a lot to a lot of people, and trying to get a good spin and an interesting take. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to reinvent the whole wheel with the character, but just kind of trying to think through what the character is like. What life's like for that person, even if they're a big metal person that turns into a truck. What 4 million years of war would mean to somebody who had to make a lot of decisions about it, and what lost a lot of friends and lost a lot of innocence probably during all that. To me, it's a lot of fun to get to use those characters. I do feel Optimus Prime, Megatron as well. You both, if they're not there, their absence is just as powerful and just as much of a force. So I think it was like when Optimus wasn't there in Transformers, we do the sort of flash to the space stories with Orion Pax, as he was calling himself. And we'd, I think if you didn't have that and you didn't see he was doing something else, every issue you'd be waiting for him to show up, and save the day or whatever. And same thing with Megatron, but that was part of the story in Robots in Disguise was the looming threat that Megatron was definitely out there. So I think in a way, you do spiral back into those characters, whether they're there or not.
Yeah. I think, that's I'd agree with all of that. But I think, funnily enough, and perhaps in a way that I didn't appreciate quite at the time. I mean, I sort of peaked with Optimus Prime and Megatron in terms of being able to write them and have fun with them and do things with them, which was in Chaos Theory. The first my first solo outing for IDW, and so that was just the two of them in a room having a long conversation, and we flashed back to them first meeting and tried to explain a bit more about their motivations. And I remember thinking at the time, but perhaps not even appreciating it enough. Here was an opportunity to, as John says, to have some fun with these two iconic characters. And I think that's the other key. I mean, John and I have both been very lucky in being able to, being given the freedom to tell new stories or to explore new facets of both Prime and Megatron's personality. Certainly, well, just by dint of Megatron changing size. I mean, that's a whole new avenue to explore. So perhaps it's felt particularly pronounced with Megatron. But it's one thing to be able to put words in the mouth of these very sort of famous pop culture icons, but to be able to stretch them in new ways and as I say, really be given the freedom to take them in new directions. That's very exciting. The plan wasn't always that Megatron was going to turn up on the Lost Light. I mean, that started to take shape in late 2012 when we were talking about Dark Cybertron and its repercussions. But until that point, season 2, if it was to happen at all, it was going to be a Megatron-less ship, and I'm very glad it turned out differently. And I used to think that I'd be entirely happy with just the D-listers and the C-listers, and as John said, you could elevate them and have fun with them. But I think I was wrong, and having someone as iconic as Megatron on board, you do maybe from issue to issue, or certainly a few issues at a time, you're suddenly reminded of who you're writing about. And these scenes you're creating with this very famous person, fictional character, are going to be memorable to a large extent because it's that particular person you're writing about.
In a lot of ways, that sort of reminds me of Worf coming into Deep Space Nine. I will always give us a Deep Space Nine metaphor for things. That was, he came in, I think, season 3 or 4, something like that. The characters were all pretty well established. They all had a good rapport, and the wrong character would have really, wrecked everything. But it turned out to be even stronger. It gave the characters more things to bounce off of, and the iconic status of the character, helped. And then also, like you did, you've really redefined Megatron in that comic, in a lot of the same way that most of the stuff that we know about Klingons came from that run of Deep Space Nine. In terms of them not being in terms of them being a reasonable race of aliens. I feel like that's kind of true with Megatron. The idea that there's more to it than what we, than met the eye. Sorry.
This next clip is from a Transmissions Declassified that we did last year, where we all tried to come up with pitches for a new idea for a Transformers live action movie. So it's no secret that we are all pretty disappointed with the Transformers live action movie franchise. So this is our attempt to do it better and come up with some interesting ideas. So this one is my idea, and you won't be surprised to hear that I drew a little bit of inspiration from the IDW Transformers comics. So please take a listen. I hope you enjoy it.
Charles, it's your turn, buddy. You want to tell us about the movie that you wrote?
Okay, so I think people who listen to our show know that I'm a big comics guy. So and since you gave me the kind of the hint to try and keep the budgets down and put the humans in a little bit. So I thought about using the IDW Infiltration, the first story arc of the IDW comics, as a template. So the idea is that, the general premise is that the Decepticons have come to Earth, but they work from the shadows to destabilize and collapse human civilization and then strip mine the planet's resources. And the reason they've been drawn to Earth is that recently there's been a discovery of this new element or mineral. There's this large deposit that's been found, somewhere in the desert of the United States. And the lead scientist who discovers this mineral discovers it has these, almost magical energy giving properties, and they named that mineral Energon. And so this new energy source that humans have discovered and have started working with, it causes the Decepticons to take notice of the planet, and so they come. And they don't come in an all out attacking force. They take vehicle forms, but every Decepticon adapts a hollow avatar and uses their hollow avatar to basically blend into the human population and work their villainy. So they basically they replace a rich business tycoon. They replace a military general and some other high-ranking officials, and they also they make a deal with a human business owner. So I haven't decided whether they reveal themselves to this guy or not, but they basically promise this guy that he can rule the planet if he agrees to help them get this Energon. So this guy is David Arkeville, and he is the CEO of Lumos Corporation, and Lumos Corporation has the mining rights to mine this mineral. And the leader the scientist who's in charge, who made this discovery and is working for Lumos Corporation, the head scientist, is Lisa Monroe. So she's the central human character. She was the first person to discover the Energon. She's been put on the project to help mine it. She believes in using the Energon for solving the world's energy crisis. And, as she starts working with it, she discovers that her boss is actually taking the Energon and not using it to, help the world's energy crisis. They're using it to develop weapons technology. And when she discovers this, she gets closer to discovering what's going on with her boss, who's working secretly with the Decepticons. And since she discovers this, Soundwave learns that she has caught on to this, and so he dispatches Ravage to kill her, take her out. And while she's been doing this, the Autobots have also been observing her and her work. So one of the Autobots, let's say Bumblebee, follows her and saves her from Ravage. So initially Bumblebee approaches her in his hollow avatar human form and makes friends with her and asks her about her work. And then later on, when she's attacked by Ravage, he has to reveal himself as his robot mode and save her. And then that causes her. So he gives the exposition as to who he is and who the Decepticons are and why they're here. And then that then he takes her to their base and reveals all the other Autobots, and then they have to figure out how to stop Megatron and the Decepticons from getting the Energon and turning it into more weapons to take over it, to destroy their planet. Also, later come back and conquer Cybertron. And the final, it's a little bit of I thought a little bit about Winter Soldier, and having like an organization that was initially thought as like a benevolent organization that's trying to to help the world, with energy, but then you find out that it's a corrupt organization, and that it has to be has to be taken down, and it's the villains are in charge of it. I also I don't want to. I feel like it might be getting too complex, but I did want to put a subplot in with Starscream trying to to take over from Megatron. Like maybe Starscream is the one in charge of managing the relationship with Lumos Corporation, and as he develops the Energon weapons and everything, he secretly squirrels away some of that for his own purposes, and develops his own power up technology. And then during the third act of the film, when the Autobots start losing and Megatron is triumphant over and about to destroy Optimus Prime, then Starscream stabs him in the back and says, now I'll take over, and I'll take over the Decepticons. And then that act of betrayal gives the Autobots the opening they need to stop the Decepticons. And so I haven't. I have a couple of scenarios about how to end the movie, but my one thought is that taking the idea from the old Headmasters comic that the main character, the main human character, figures out that they can poison this Energon and make it destabilizing to the Transformers. But if she does that, then she has to say goodbye to her new friends because they won't be able to stay on the planet. And so she has to make that Sophie's choice, and the Energon is corrupted. And then the Decepticons are, since they were using the Energon, they're destabilized, and they have to leave and retreat. But the Autobots also can't stay. And then, that's the end of the movie. And maybe put a stinger in there about like some portion of the Energon was left uncorrupted, so you have a mechanism for a sequel. So that's my overall plot. For the characters, so Lisa Monroe, the main scientist, the main character, played by Sonequa Martin Green. So she's the main character on Star Trek Discovery. David Arkaville, the CEO of Lumos Corporation, played by Brent Spiner. He might remember him from Data from Star Trek Next Generation. Optimus Prime, voice Peter Cullen, but his holo avatar will be Clancy Brown. Bumblebee, his voice will be Greg Sipes, but his holo avatar will be Tom Holland. Wheeljack would be Alan Tudyk, both voice and holo avatar. Jetfire, Greg Berger, holo avatar Ving Rhames, and RC, both voice and holo avatar Daisy Ridley. For the Decepticons, Megatron would be voiced by Frank Welker, but his holo avatar would be Idris Elba. Starscream's voice would be Steve Blum, and his holo avatar would be Andy Serkis. Soundwave's voice would be Frank Welker, but his holo avatar would be Tilda Swinton, and she would be silent for most of the movie when she's in human form. Ravage would just be a robot Jaguar, so no holo avatar. Maybe we could do something, I don't know, maybe. And then Blitzwing, just throw a triple changer in there, would be Keith David for both his voice and holo avatar. And director, I picked Edgar Wright, because I think he could strike the right balance between action and humor. I think in particular, I'm thinking of Hot Fuzz was a really good movie. I thought that struck that balance. I haven't seen Baby Driver yet, but I've heard good things about that. And also, I also picked a writer for the script. I would pick Adam F. Goldberg as the writer because he's a big Transformers nerd. So that's my idea.
Well done.
It made me think. I didn't think about who was going to play Optimus Prime in my movie, and it would absolutely not be Peter Cullen. Okay, thematically, it wouldn't fit, but I would want somebody who can do a really good John Wayne impression. Because I don't think Peter Cullen even does a good Optimus Prime anymore, or even a good Peter Cullen. So he needs to just be brushed aside.
I'm really attached to the idea of using Idris Elba and Clancy Brown as either awesome. Optimus or Megatron. Like those two guys in leading roles as robot characters is really doing it for me. I love
Clancy Brown so much.
And I felt like you could, if you wanted to save on the CGI, you could have a lot of scenes where you have them as humans before they get revealed as robots, and have
absolutely. I'm agog that in 5 Transformers movies they never once took the notion of we could give the robots more character time with holo avatars. Yeah. Given that it took 5 movies for a robot to talk to someone else through the radio, that's not as surprising. But
I like that. That was good. You definitely got me with the exposition there, though. You have lots of it. I'm drawing a blank. Your female lead. I'm thinking that's not the original name for Circuit Breaker, is it?
No, actually, that's a good idea. Maybe I should change that to Josie Beller. That would be the
Josie Beller. That's right.
That's a good idea.
As you were talking about it, I was thinking, man, that sounds like it's the plot from the original Marvel comic, and he's talking about Circuit Breaker, but I couldn't remember Circuit Breaker's real name. So I'm like, oh, he must be talking about Circuit Breaker. But then you never revealed that she gets into an accident and becomes Circuit Breaker.
I totally didn't think of that, Daryl. So yeah, let's throw that in. Let's make that the final act. She gets injured and is paralyzed, and then maybe the next movie she has to become Circuit Breaker.
Now this just became a Marvel movie. I like that. That was good.
This final clip of our special look back at the 6 years of our podcast is from our interview with Mairghread Scott. This is from Transmissions 177. And this was right around the time that Till All Are One launched. And, as you know, probably from our reviews of that series, we loved it. I think at this point we had read the first issue and we were excited about it. This is essentially talking with Mairghread about the setting, creating developing these new characters and just world building and how it compared to some of the other series like Robots in the Skies. So enjoy. Thanks for listening. And we'll be back with new episodes next week.
Let's get into some discussion about Till All Are One. So first, I wanted to ask, what would your one sentence pitch be for Till All Are One?
Oh yeah, it's House of Cards if there was one good person.
Okay. I'm guessing that's Windblade is the good person.
Yeah, like she's our sort of good person. Although as issue 1 shows, she's very much that becomes a very big question mark.
Right.
So. My other thought is always that this, if you read the Transformers Windblade series, Till All Are One is sort of everything coming home to roost. So we've got a lot of different conspiracies and conspiracies on top of conspiracies.
Right.
All kind of fumbling together. So it's been a lot of fun. And this issue in particular was really fun. I'm just so happy to start off with someone dying in the middle of a wasteland. I just feel like it's a really nice opening. Just set the tenor right.
With Till All Are One focusing on the political and social situation on Cybertron, do you see this as kind of the spiritual successor to John Barber's early work on Robots in Disguise before Dark Cybertron?
I don't want to make that claim, but I very much did love that part of John Barber's run and the Metalhawk, Bumblebee, Starscream conflict. And we're living in very much that same kind of realm. Mm-hmm. So you could definitely say that there's this quote from 1984 called, that says, we will meet again in the place where there is no darkness. Okay. And it's this sort of theme with the main character where, he has this dream that, if we succeed in overthrowing this government, it'll be a place where there is no darkness. It'll be this perfect, happy place. And he ends up telling one of the other characters that character turns out to be a traitor. And at the end of the book, the main character gets locked up in the Ministry of Love in the prison of the main government, and they have the lights on 24/7. So it's a place where there is no darkness. And that's kind of what we wanted to do with the title Till All Are One, is that Till All Are One is both what everyone in the book is trying to strive for, this idea of like unity and cohesion, but it's also sort of the biggest danger in the book with the idea of like forced assimilation and, dominance and empire. So it's sort of what does Till All Are One mean to every character and how far are they willing to go to sort of own that phrase.
Okay.
So that's where my mind went.
This is heavy.
I know. Well, after the Christmas issue, man, I had to redeem myself. But we're really excited. I mean, we've got a big cast. We got Ironhide and Chromia and Rat Trap and Starscream and all the council members, and really feel like we can just have years worth of stories. I like it so already. So I'm really, really excited to show off everyone in the book instead of just, having to center everything around Windblade.
Right. Yeah, that's actually something we were curious about. So I'll mention that in a moment. Another thing I was curious about, since we first discovered your Transformers work back on Transformers Prime Beast Hunters, the comic that you did back in 2013. Did you take any inspiration from that book? I mean, it's not quite the same situation, but you did have the Dinobots on Cybertron trying to grapple with with multiple groups of people trying to survive.
Well, there are themes that every writer kind of likes to deal with. And the idea of, morally gray kind of survival versus morality kind of stories are things that I like to deal with. So you can draw parallels from that. I am trying to be more hopeful than that, because we ended on kind of a dark note, which was originally much darker. Then my husband read it and he was like, you cannot end this like this. We had to do like a massive rewrite. But no, I mean, I think that one of the biggest difference, though, is that a lot of the themes in Beast Hunters was the idea of sort of the worst person for the job. Like Grimlock is the last person you would want to lead a group of people for any reason other than into this immediate battle. And actually, I think the neat thing about Till All Are One is that everyone is starting to get a lot more savvy.
Okay.
And so you have much more cunning players, much more, characters who have their own agendas and are actually really useful and trying to get those own agendas.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So like we're starting to like beef up Obsidian a little more, and we kind of, Solita 1's at stake in all of this. And, Ironhide ended up playing like a huge part. I was actually a little surprised at how big his part got. And then, Windblade is obviously much more savvy than she was in Volume 1. So yeah, and Starscream, honestly, Starscream's the one he's losing it a little bit. Like he's on the shakiest footing. So
yeah, I mean, the one thing I did notice, like that ghost of Bumblebee is still following him around, and I guess, I mean, that I'm 90% sure that's in his head, but that's still an open question. But I'm wondering how that's going to play out.
Well, if you really want to know, no. Oh, you almost got me. No, yeah, I really like the Ghost of Bumblebee, and we wanted to keep him a more consistent part as Starscream's sort of
Jiminy
acerbic,
Cricket?
conscious. Yeah. Yeah, his Jiminy Cricket. Which I love, because I love that first moment writing that where Starscream's lying and Bumblebee's like, you don't even need to be lying. Like, why are you just taking this first for no reason?
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this episode of Transmissions. But just because this episode is over doesn't mean the Transformers fun has to stop. Join us and other Transformers fans on our Discord chat server by visiting transmissionspodcast.com/discord. If you would like to learn more about how you could support the Transmissions Podcast, just visit transmissionspodcast.com/support. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you again next week.